My name is Lucy. I'm 30 years old, born and raised in a quiet town in Ohio. From the outside, my family looked like the picture of an all-American dream. A white two-story house, a neat little wooden fence, my dad's perfectly trimmed lawn, and Sunday dinners that seemed warm. But behind that door was a world only I truly knew, one where fairness never existed. My father, Robert, worked as an accountant for a local company. My mother, Helen, was a sales clerk at the department store downtown. They proudly showed off the happy family image, but living in that house even a single day would show anyone it was just a shiny coat of paint. I was the eldest, 6 years older than my brother Andrew. From the moment I could remember, I was under immense pressure. Grades had to be perfect, behavior flawless, everything I did had to be the best. When I brought home a math test with 95 points, my father looked at me coldly and asked, "Where are the other 5? When I won second place in the 5th grade science fair, my mother sighed, "You have to try harder, Lucy. First place is what matters." Andrew, though, he was welcomed like a little prince the moment they carried him home from the hospital. My room had plain white walls, an old chipped desk, and a simple wooden bed. His room, painted with a bright football mural, a race car bed, and shelves packed with expensive toys. On birthdays or Christmas, I got textbooks or practical clothes, what my dad called gifts that prepare you for the future. Andrew tore open wrapping paper to reveal the newest video game console, rare Lego sets, or a pricey bicycle. When I asked my mom why it was so different, she replied shortly, "Your brother is still little, he needs more encouragement." My dad added, "Girls should be strong, able to endure." By age 10, I already knew how to wash dishes, vacuum, and do laundry. Andrew was 4, scattering toys and candy wrappers everywhere, and I had to clean up. If I complained, my mom just shook her head. "Pick it up, Lucy. Boys are messy." At 12, I was assigned to babysit Andrew whenever my parents went out for dinners or parties. I had to drop homework, skip school activities, and take care of him. My parents always praised me as being so mature for your age, as if that was a compliment, when really, it was just their excuse to dump responsibility onto me. The bitterest memory was Christmas when I was 15. For months I had saved tips from working at a bakery to buy myself a used laptop for school, hoping my parents might pitch in for a better one. That morning, I unwrapped my gift. A second-hand laptop so slow it took a full second to type a letter. Minutes later, Andrew squealed as he opened his gift. A brand new gaming computer with a large LED monitor and a premium gaming chair. My father smiled proudly and said, "Andrew needs this to train his reflexes. It'll help his career later." My throat tightened. I couldn't say a word. At 16, I started working weekend shifts at the local coffee shop. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed money for books, clothes, and the basics my parents freely gave Andrew without hesitation. He got a weekly allowance for motivation. I worked 20 hours a week while he did nothing but enjoy himself. I still remember my dad's words when he saw me exhausted after a shift. "Working early makes you grow up faster." But he never said that to Andrew. Every word, every action made one truth clear. In this house, I wasn't the child to be cherished. I was the one who carried the load, the backup plan, the background for my brother to shine. And from that point on, I quietly made myself a promise that I would break free from this unfair cycle and build a life no one could ever take from me. Since I started working at the coffee shop at 16, I barely had a single truly free day. After school, I rushed straight to work, standing 6 to 7 hours, my hands always smelling of coffee and baked goods. Every dollar I earned was carefully recorded in a small notebook I kept hidden in my desk drawer. I didn't dare spend recklessly, even skipping outings with friends just to save. By senior year of high school, I had saved enough to cover books, clothes, and part of my college tuition. I dreamed of studying finance at a respected university. But when I brought up the idea of asking my parents to help with the rest, their answers were the same as always. My father said the family budget had to be reserved for Andrew, who was only 10 at the time, to prepare for his future. My mother softened her voice and said, "You're capable, Lucy. You know how to take care of yourself. Let us take care of your brother." I understood then. It wasn't that they couldn't help, it was that they didn't want to. So I handled everything myself. Scholarship applications, student loan forms, and part-time job searches near campus. The day I received my acceptance letter from New York University with a partial scholarship, my emotions were mixed. Joy that my dream had come true, but fear because I still had to cover a massive gap in tuition and living costs on my own. Still, I vowed not to let anyone take this chance away from me. College was a relentless cycle of study and work. By day I sat in lectures. At night, I worked the register at a supermarket, And on weekends I waited tables at an Italian restaurant near campus. Some nights I slept less than 4 hours, yet I still woke up on time, gulped down instant coffee and rushed out the dorm. Friends would ask why I didn't just ask my family for help. I would give a dry smile and say, "I'm used to it." The struggle wasn't wasted. My GPA stayed among the highest in my department. By junior year, a professor recommended me for an internship at a Manhattan financial firm. It was only an assistant data analyst role, but for me it was a precious stepping stone. I learned how to read financial reports, track market trends, and most importantly, how to negotiate and survive in a cutthroat environment. By senior year, I graduated with honors and received a full-time offer from the same firm, with a starting salary higher than I had ever dared to imagine. I rented a tiny studio in Brooklyn, just enough for a bed, desk, and bookshelf. Yet every time I walked through the door, my chest warmed. It was mine, a space free from comparisons and burdens placed on me for someone else's sake. The new job was no easier. I often stayed late, volunteering for the tough projects others avoided. A year later, I was promoted, my salary increased, and my bonus was enough to open a separate savings account dedicated to buying a home. I even started small investments in stocks and index funds, skills I had sharpened from work itself. While I poured myself into building a future, Andrew's path was the opposite. With the money my parents had saved for him, he went to college out of state, changing majors more than once. Sometimes my mother would mention he had been gifted a new car or taken trips with friends. I said nothing. I already knew the answer if I asked. He's young, he should enjoy himself. 3 years into my career in New York, I had saved enough to put down 20% on a one-bedroom condo on the Upper East Side. The day I signed the contract, my hands shook with emotion. Years of endless work, frugal living, and sacrifices had led to this moment. I finally had a place of my own, untouchable by anyone. When I invited a few close friends to celebrate, one of them asked, "Lucy, your family must be so proud, right?" I smiled and changed the subject. The truth was, I had never once heard my parents say they were proud of me. Every phone call revolved around Andrew's latest accomplishments, even if it was just him winning a casual soccer game. I had long accepted the lack of recognition. My success was never about changing their views. It was a reminder to myself that I could stand tall, even without a single supporting hand behind me. That night, sitting alone by the window, watching city lights shimmer in my glass of wine, I knew I had broken free from the vicious cycle of my childhood. Yet deep down, I still felt the faintest thread tying me back to my family. In April, when I was 30, I decided to return to Ohio for my mother's 58th birthday. It had been 8 months since I last visited, and though my relationship with my parents was always shaky, I thought at least a short trip would keep up appearances. I landed on a Friday evening and drove the rental car straight to my parents' house. The familiar 2-story home looked the same, except the lawn no longer seemed as well kept. My father, Robert, opened the door with a polite smile and gave me an awkward hug. My mother, Helen, appeared more cheerful, but her eyes only lit up when she mentioned Andrew had already arrived the day before. Andrew came out of the living room holding a beer, looking almost exactly as I last saw him. Designer hoodie, a new sports watch, and that familiar smug smile. "Well, the city girl is here. New York still as crazy as ever?" He teased, half joking, half sarcastic. I replied shortly, "Still the same." Dinner turned into Andrew's monologue about his big plan, taking a special coding boot camp that would open career opportunities. My mother eagerly explained the cost was $14,000 and said she was sure it's a worthy investment. I stayed silent, remembering how I had once scraped every dollar just to cover my own tuition. After dinner, Andrew went out to meet friends and my parents went upstairs early. I cleared the dishes, ready to sleep after the long flight and drive, but couldn't fall asleep. Restless, I decided to go down for some water. As I reached the stair landing, I heard the front door open softly, then my father's low voice from the living room. "How much is it?" Andrew's voice followed, quiet but clear enough. "About 38,000, no, better round it up to 40. Credit cards, quick loans, plus some basketball bets." My chest tightened. Gambling? I had never once heard Andrew mention this. My father sighed. "Your mother thinks it's only 20,000. Don't let her know." Andrew chuckled awkwardly. "I know. But I need a way to pay it off fast or I'll get sued." Then came my father's next words, sending a chill down my spine. "Don't worry. We'll let Lucy handle it." Andrew laughed. "I figured you had a plan." My father's voice grew firm. "She's got a good job in New York, her own condo. We'll tell her it's a family business investment, maybe real estate. She'll sign a loan under her name, will promise to pay interest. She'll think it's her chance to finally work with the family. Andrew hesitated. But what if she asks to see financial plans? My father lowered his tone, but I still heard clearly. Don't you get it? She's always wanted approval. Play on that and it's done. I gripped the stair railing, holding my breath. Every word cut into me like knives. All the years I had worked myself raw, paying for my own needs while Andrew was handed everything. Now they weren't just ignoring my effort. They were plotting to exploit it. I heard my mother's slippers down the hall. What are you two talking about? She asked. My father answered smoothly. Just Andrew's work plans. She lowered her voice. If it's about that debt, I think Lucy should help. Family has to support each other. He already has enough. It's time she gave back. Andrew quickly agreed. Exactly. Just a couple of signatures. It won't cost her anything. I swallowed my fury, retreating like a shadow to my room. Shutting the door softly, I sat on the bed, my heart pounding. This room once held nights of studying, hoping one day my parents would see me as worthy as Andrew. But tonight I understood that hope had died. I grabbed my phone and jotted down every line I overheard. I couldn't let emotions make me forget. Then I sat in darkness, my mind racing like a computer, drafting steps I needed to take. I knew I couldn't wait until morning. The alarm clock glowed 1:47 a.m. I rose, pulled out my suitcase and packed my things. The birthday gift for my mother, a silk scarf I had bought from a Fifth Avenue store, stayed on the table with a short card. Happy birthday. I'm sorry I couldn't stay. No explanations, no chance for them to twist the story right away. By 3 a.m. I slipped out the door, careful to avoid the creaky stair step, and stepped into the night. The Ohio air was chilly, but I breathed easier once the door shut behind me. I got in the rental car and drove straight to a hotel near the airport. On the way, only one thought burned in me. They had let me down countless times before, but this was the first time I saw the betrayal so clearly. If I didn't protect myself now, years of effort could vanish with a single signature. And I swore, this time I would strike first. When I stepped into the hotel room near the airport, it felt like I had just left a battlefield. Andrew's laughter and my father's firm voice still echoed in my head. Every word, let Lucy handle it, piercing like a needle. I knew I didn't have the luxury to feel shocked or sad. If I didn't act right away, they would find a way to turn that scheme into reality within weeks. I switched on the desk lamp, set my suitcase down, and opened my laptop. First, I logged into my main bank account where I kept most of my salary and year-end bonus. In less than 5 minutes, I had transferred almost the entire balance to a new account at a different bank. One only I knew about, unlinked from any documents or information my family could access. I left behind a small amount in the old account, just enough to keep it active in case they grew curious, and checked so nothing would seem unusual. Next, I called the credit card company's hotline. The female operator's steady voice came through. How can we help you today? I need all my cards locked immediately. Possible misuse of my information, I said slowly, recording the entire call as proof. She confirmed the request, told me new cards would be mailed to my New York address, and from now on every transaction would require my direct PIN verification. Right after hanging up, I opened my email and sent an urgent message to my financial advisor, Mr. Miller, the same man who had helped me build an investment plan since my first year working. I didn't give details, only explained that I suspected possible identity fraud and needed an immediate appointment to review my entire portfolio and set up extra safeguards. But protecting assets wasn't just about money. I had to block any chance they could use my legal identity. I logged into the 3 major U.S. credit bureaus and filed for a full credit freeze. That meant even if someone tried to apply for loans or open new accounts in my name, the request would be stopped at the very first step, unless I personally lifted the freeze. The clock read 4:12 a.m. My eyes burned, but my mind was razor sharp. I searched for New York law firms specializing in family financial disputes and asset protection. One office, Sterling Ross, popped up with top reviews for fast response and discretion. I filled out their intake form, asked for contact within 24 hours, and added a note. Urgent situation, risk of financial exploitation by relatives. Once everything was set, I shut the laptop and sat in silence, watching faint light seep through the curtains. It felt like I had just locked a door tight, but outside someone was still trying to force their way in. I knew my father, he wouldn't stop just because I stayed quiet. Around 9 a.m. my phone started buzzing nonstop. Calls from my mother, then my father, then Andrew. Texts poured in with every tone imaginable, from fake concern to direct blame. Why did you sneak out in the middle of the night? The family needs you and you run away? Lucy, at least talk to your parents. I switched the phone to silent and didn't read another word. That afternoon I caught the earliest flight back to New York. Touching down at LaGuardia brought a measure of safety, but I knew this was only the first step. Back at my condo I locked every door, double-checked the bolts and the video doorbell. I never thought I'd have to protect myself from my own family, but now I had no choice. Later in the day Mr. Miller called back, his tone serious. I'll make time for you tomorrow morning. We'll go through every account and make sure no one has access but you. I also want to establish some preventative legal measures. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Thank you, Miller. I'll bring all the necessary documents. That night when I opened my email I found a reply from Sterling Ross. An attorney named Abigail Ross would meet me the next afternoon. The message ended with a line that gave me a sliver of comfort. We've handled many cases involving financial exploitation within families. The most important thing is to stay one step ahead. Sitting in my apartment I looked around. Every piece of furniture, every framed picture, every book was the product of years of standing on my own. The thought that someone, even family, could plot to turn me into their source of cash filled me with both fury and a chilling sense of betrayal. I poured myself a glass of water, stood by the window and watched the city lights come alive. Somewhere out there I was sure they were already planning their next move. But this time I had shut down every path. And if they dared to push forward, they would face a completely different Lucy, sharp, ready to strike back and no longer chained to the role of the family's silent provider. 3 days after returning to New York, I had finished nearly all the asset protection steps my advisor and lawyer recommended. But I knew that unless I confronted them directly they would never stop. My father was the type who pressed harder when met with silence. And Andrew, he had never once taken responsibility for any consequence in his life. That evening I sat in my home office, opened my laptop and launched a video call app. I sent one short message to the family group. 8 p.m. tonight I'm calling. All 3 of you need to be there. Without waiting for a reply I shut my phone. At exactly 8 p.m. the screen lit up with my mother's face, her eyes tense from the start. My father sat beside her, arms crossed, while Andrew leaned back in his chair with his usual air of indifference. Why did you sneak out in the middle of the night, Lucy? My mother began, her tone half scolding, half pretending concern. Guests came by the next day, everyone asked. I cut her off, staring straight into the camera. Let's skip the act. I heard everything. Word for word. All 3 froze. My father leaned forward. What are you talking about? The $40,000 gambling debt Andrew owes. The plan to let Lucy handle it. The scheme to trick me into signing a loan under my name to cover it. Andrew's face paled slightly but he still tried to act unfazed. You were eavesdropping? Childish. I gave a cold smile. Interesting. What bothers you isn't the plan itself but that I heard it. My father jumped in, voice sharp. Don't twist it like we're trying to harm you. It's an investment opportunity for the whole family. Don't call it an investment. Call it what it is. Exploitation. You know I have money, you know how hard I worked for it, and you see it as my duty to give back. Families don't do that to each other. My mother's eyes welled up. You're being unfair. We sacrificed so much for you. I cut her off, my tone firm. Sacrificed what? When I asked for tuition help you told me, handle it yourself. When Andrew wanted a new car you bought it right away. When I worked 3 shifts a day to pay student loans, where were you? Andrew slammed his hand on the table. That's in the past. Now it's time you give back. I locked eyes with him. No. I won't pay a single cent of your gambling debt. I won't sign any papers. And if any of you even try to use my name, my information, or contact a financial institution under me, I'll sue. No second warning. My father's face reddened. You dare threaten your own parents? I'm protecting myself. If you had ever done that for me, I wouldn't need to say this now. My mother softened her tone, trying one last time. Lucy, think again. Family is family. What will outsiders think when they hear you abandoned your brother in hard times? I let out a dry laugh. Outsiders will hear the truth. Every bit of favoritism, every dollar handed one way in this entire scheme. I have proof. Andrew glared. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I replied, voice low and steady. The air grew heavy. My father muttered something to my mother, then looked at me. If you leave this call, don't expect to come back. That's something I've been ready for a long time, I said and clicked end call. The screen went dark. leaving my faint reflection. I took a deep breath, opened my notes file and wrote down every detail of the conversation, saving it in the folder my lawyer had told me to keep. Then I blocked every number, email and social account linked to them. The phone on my desk buzzed nonstop for several minutes, but no sound reached me. I stood, walked onto the balcony and let the night air wash over my face. It wasn't relief exactly, but something else. The feeling that for the first time in my life I had drawn a line no one would ever cross. I knew this wasn't the end. They would try to reach me again, maybe through relatives or mutual contacts. But at least now I had every tool in place to protect myself. More than that, I had finally said aloud what I had only dared to think for years. That night I managed a few hours of real sleep, a rare peace after weeks of tension. But deep down I knew the real storm was only just beginning. Only 2 days after the video call I began to feel the weight of cutting ties. My voicemail was full of messages from unknown numbers, but the voices were familiar. Relatives. My mother's sister, Aunt Mary, spoke sharply. "Lucy, I'm truly disappointed. You abandoned your parents and brother in their time of need and said such cruel things. They raised you all these years and this is how you repay them." Another message came from a cousin on my father's side. "I heard you refused to help Andrew with his debt and even threatened to sue your own father. Family is meant to support each other, not turn away." It was clear my parents had already shared their version of the story with everyone. In that version I was cast as the selfish, ungrateful daughter. Someone with money who refused to help her family. I knew if I stayed silent people would keep believing it. But I also knew not everyone was worth my time to explain. I carefully chose whom to reach out to. Only those I trusted to be fair enough to hear both sides. First was my grandmother, Margaret, the one person in my family who had always treated me fairly. I wrote her an email, short but clear. The years I had to provide for myself, the favoritism toward Andrew, and finally, the scheme I overheard to make me shoulder his $40,000 gambling debt. I didn't use bitter words, but I wrote enough for her to understand this wasn't a small quarrel. This was a deliberate betrayal. Next, I sent a similar email to Emily, my cousin on my mother's side, the same age as me. She had witnessed many times when my parents ignored my achievements but praised Andrew for the smallest things. And lastly, I wrote to Uncle Thomas, my father's younger brother, who I remembered once cautioning my father about treating his children so differently. In my emails I wrote, "I'm not asking anyone to take my side. I just want you to know the full truth before you judge. I stepped away from a situation I believe was harmful to me, and I hope you respect that choice, even if you don't agree." Just hours later my grandmother called. Her voice trembled but was steady. "Lucy, I always knew they favored him, but I didn't realize it went this far. The year you asked for tuition help and were turned away, I asked your mother about it. She just said, 'Lucy can handle it herself.' I'm sorry I didn't do more back then." Her words caught in my throat. All those years I thought no one else had noticed. Emily texted a simple line, "I believe you. And if you ever need someone to back you up, I'm here." But the most surprising response came from Uncle Thomas. He called right after reading my email and invited me to lunch the next day at an Italian restaurant near my Manhattan office. Sitting across from me, he didn't mince words. "Lucy, your parents have always had a blind spot when it comes to Andrew. I'm not shocked things ended up this way. You did the right thing. But prepare yourself, they won't give up." I nodded. He was right. If one plan failed, they would find another. The support of those three was enough to steady me. I didn't need the whole family to understand, just a few who truly saw what had happened. Meanwhile, news trickled in from people I still kept in touch with. My parents were telling their version. Lucy abandoned the family. Everywhere. An old friend from Ohio messaged me that my mother had told the church congregation I was blinded by money and no longer saw family as family. Instead of anger, I felt relief. They were drawing the picture they wanted to believe, and I had no obligation to repaint it with the truth. Those who wanted to know would come to me. Those who preferred a one-sided story had never really stood by me anyway. That evening, I sat by my apartment window, looking down at the lit-up streets. My phone was quieter than usual, partly because I had blocked most numbers. The cool, early spring breeze drifted in, bringing an unfamiliar but welcome calm. I knew this story wasn't over. My father wasn't the type to back down, and Andrew surely hadn't given up on finding a way into my wallet. But at least now I wasn't alone. My grandmother, Emily, and Uncle Thomas. 3 people were enough to remind me I wasn't entirely isolated from my own bloodline. Most importantly, I had broken free from the role of the designated scapegoat they had forced on me for 3 decades. I sipped hot tea, opened my laptop, and began writing plans for my next projects at work. Out there, they could keep spinning their own version of the story. As for me, I would keep writing mine, one no one else had the power to edit or take away. 3 months after cutting ties with my parents and Andrew, I received an internal company email. They were seeking candidates for a project manager position at the San Francisco office. The role was equal in rank but offered more autonomy and included housing support for the first year. As soon as I read it, I knew this was my chance to start fresh, far from Ohio and its suffocating memories. I applied that same day. A week later, my manager called me into his office. "Lucy, you're our top choice. If you agree, we'll begin your transfer within 2 months." Without hesitation, I signed the papers. The next 2 months were filled with packing, selling furniture, and putting my New York condo on the market. On my last day in the city, I stood for a long time at the window, gazing down at the streets I had walked for nearly 8 years. This was the place where I built my independence, but also where I had spent years on guard against my family's interference. San Francisco welcomed me with the salty scent of the ocean and crisp morning air. I rented a bright apartment in Potrero Hill with a balcony overlooking the bay. Within weeks, I had arranged everything into a clean, quiet space, just the way I liked it. Life here was completely different from New York. Each morning I walked to work, passing cafes filled with the smell of fresh bread. On weekends, I joined hiking trips with an outdoor club. No one knew me as Lucy from Ohio with a complicated family. Here I was simply Lucy, the new project manager, a runner, and someone who loved classic finance books. Through a colleague, I was introduced to a support group for adults who had grown up in toxic families. At first, I hesitated. I had never shared my story with strangers. But part of me knew I needed to hear from others who had lived through the same. The first meeting took place in a small community room. Chairs arranged in a circle, soft lighting, no phones. When a middle-aged man spoke about parents who constantly borrowed money and used guilt to manipulate him, I felt my own story reflected back at me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was exaggerating or selfish, the way my family had labeled me. I started attending regularly. There, I met Rachel, whose brother had tricked her into signing loan papers under the excuse of a family business. And Daniel, who had changed his number and email multiple times to avoid his mother's demands for money. Together we shared strategies to protect finances, but more importantly, we learned how to set emotional boundaries. The group made me realize how defensive I had become, even with people who meant no harm. Slowly, I practiced opening up, making friends outside of work. Rachel and I grew close. On weekends we browsed farmers markets or joined early morning yoga classes together. Work at the new office turned out smoother than I expected. The San Francisco team was smaller, more agile, giving me greater decision-making power. I applied the strict management skills I'd honed in New York, helping our project finish ahead of schedule and under budget. After 6 months, the regional director commended me as a key driver of change. Still, the past sometimes resurfaced. One October evening, as I was getting ready for bed, a strange number rang over and over. I instantly knew who it was. Instead of anxiety, I felt calm. I switched off the ringer and set the phone down. My boundaries were firm now, no longer easy to breach. On my 1-year anniversary in San Francisco, I stood on my balcony watching the sun sink behind the Golden Gate Bridge. I thought about the years in Ohio, about the house that once suffocated me, and realized I had traveled farther than I ever imagined. Not just in miles, but in the way I lived. Free, intentional, surrounded by healthy relationships. I still stayed in touch with my grandmother, Emily, and Uncle Thomas. They sometimes sent congratulatory messages when they saw photos of my hikes or conferences. They never asked about my parents or Andrew, and I never brought them up. I had learned that sometimes silence was the strongest form of peace. San Francisco wasn't my final stop, but it was where I began rewriting my story. Here, I was no longer the emotional and financial scapegoat for my family. I was Lucy, someone who chose her own life, built a circle of trust, and knew her worth didn't need validation from anyone. Most of all, I knew that if they ever tried to find me again, I was ready. Not to fall back into the old cycle, but to show them that the door they once used to enter my life was now locked and the key rested firmly in my hands. One quiet Tuesday afternoon in San Francisco, I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when my inbox flashed. From Andrew Miller. Subject: late but necessary. I froze for a moment, spoon still in hand. It had been over 2 years since I last heard directly from Andrew. Everything I knew about him came in fragments from Grandma or Emily, Failed business attempts, mounting debt, and eventually selling the condo our parents bought him just to cover part of what he owed. I hesitated a few minutes before opening the email. Lucy, I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to try. Last year, I officially filed for bankruptcy. My accounts were closed, my credit cards taken away. I rent a small room with 2 strangers on the outskirts of Columbus, working 2 full-time jobs, days at a computer repair shop, nights delivering food. I started therapy for gambling addiction. My doctor says the first step is facing the consequences. And the biggest consequence for me was losing you. Losing the person I thought would always be there no matter how badly I messed up. Now I understand you left because you had to protect yourself. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I just want you to know I'm trying to be different. If there's even the smallest chance you'd let me talk, I'd be grateful. Andrew. I read it 3 times. The arrogant, manipulative tone I once knew was gone. But I also knew emotions could be faked, especially when someone was at rock bottom. I shut my laptop and stepped onto the balcony, breathing deeply. The sunset burned orange across the bay, but my mind replayed the image of Andrew the night I overheard the scheme, smirking as he said, "Let Lucy handle it," as if it were obvious. That evening, I told Rachel during our support group meeting. She tilted her head. "What do you think?" Part of me wants to believe it's real. Another part fears that if I open that door, everything will slide back. Rachel nodded. "There's nothing wrong with keeping the door half closed. You decide who steps in." It took me nearly 2 weeks to respond. I chose every word carefully. "Andrew, thank you for writing. I acknowledge what you're doing to change. But I need time to consider whether contact is possible. For now, respect my boundaries and don't reach out in any way other than email. Lucy." His reply came quickly. "I understand. I'll wait." 3 months later, another email arrived. Short, describing steady work, some debt repaid, and consistent therapy sessions. He didn't ask for money, didn't complain, just gave an update. Slowly, I began to see patience, something Andrew had never shown before. By the 4th email, I agreed to a short video call. I chose early morning my time, midday in Ohio, a time when I knew I'd be clear-headed and harder to sway emotionally. When the screen lit up, Andrew looked different. Gone were the designer hoodies and flashy watches. He wore a rolled-up shirt, hair neatly cut, eyes steady. "Thank you for giving me this chance," he said quietly. "I know I did terrible things." I answered firmly, "This call is just to talk. It doesn't mean things go back to the way they were." We spoke for about 20 minutes. Andrew described working at the repair shop, moving into a smaller room to cut costs, and learning to budget every dollar. I shared bits about San Francisco, my work, and the support group. Neither of us mentioned our parents. Before ending, Andrew said, "I don't expect you to believe me yet. But at least now you know I'm trying to live differently." I nodded. "Time will tell. And I'll step away the moment things slip back." After the call ended, I sat quietly for a while. No sense of triumph, no rush of emotion, just a calm stillness. I understood this wasn't a magical reconciliation. It was a test to see whether part of my past could exist alongside my present without destroying it. I saved the recording into my notes folder as I always did, a habit of caution I couldn't shake. Then I closed the laptop, looked out at the balcony, and reminded myself, whether Andrew truly changes or not, the key to my life stays in my hands. No one else will ever turn it again. My story, from being a daughter constantly overlooked and taken advantage of, to standing firm and protecting my own assets, is proof that personal boundaries are something no one has the right to cross. I learned to walk away from toxic blood ties and build a new life in a safe place, surrounded by people who respect me. Though the past left scars, my present is filled with freedom, control, and peace. And that is the greatest victory I have ever achieved. What do you think about my journey and how I confronted my family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel to hear more real, emotional stories about family life.